Hello, everybody. It is Sunday, the 25th of May, and I want to think about really an age-old question. How did evil enter into this world, and how is it allowed to be here? And if people are completely deluded, they would actually ask the question of how does God allow for evil to be in this world? Well, if you say the word God and you are referring to the God of the Bible, how does he allow for evil to be in this world? It's because it serves him. He has, to a great amount, evil was introduced by the gods, and it serves them. That's why it's allowed to be here. And we are not standing in our own truth to prevent it. I've been following, or I've been watching a lot of videos about what's going on in Gaza, in that war. And I just heard Jewish women in Israel, when they were confronted with the idea that children are being killed in Gaza, or babies are being killed in Gaza, basically turning around saying they don't care. I mean, literally saying that, I don't care. One woman actually saying, well, it is natural for a Jewish woman to love and protect her children, and that Arab women don't feel that way. They don't love their children. Which, it goes beyond what I can understand. How you can even think like that. And how do we get there? That is the question. How does a human being get to the point? How does a mother get to the point where she can say something like that? And actually, that is her truth. How did she get to that truth inside of herself? Now, I think we've all come to the conclusion that we are traumatized. I mean, we are a traumatized species. And that we need to work through that trauma in order to become functioning human beings again, which obviously we're not anymore. I mean, by the time you get to that stage, you've lost it completely. So, working through our trauma, and many, I hear so many going, childhood trauma. You must work through your childhood trauma. You're not going back far enough. You're nowhere near the root. Nowhere near. Because the trauma that was inflicted on you during childhood was inflicted by people that were traumatized themselves. So we're passing on the trauma from generation to generation, and just to trace it back to your parents. Nowhere near. Nor does it do any good at the moment to look at the conflicts that are going on and the rights and wrongs of each individual conflict, because we solve one conflict, we go into the next. Yeah, it's, as I say, it's just a never-ending circle until we get to the very root of the trauma. Now, as I said, I heard the Jewish woman say, a Jewish woman loves and protects her children. That is natural to her. Now, I don't want to talk about Jewish women, but religious women, because Christians are just as bad, and so are Muslims, quite often. Women like that, they don't love their children. I tell you that right now. They do not love their children. They love God. they're bringing their children on to God, as Jesus said, bring the children unto me. That's what they're doing. They either love God or they fear God, or they have done the Isaiah reasoning with God and come to the conclusion that that is what is best for their children, but they don't love their children. The Isaiah reasoning is when God comes and says, I am the mighty one. And that is it, the mighty ones, the rulers. Whether that is human beings that have become the image of that thought, or there are actually others out there, it doesn't really matter. It is just that thought in a human being that I am the ruler. My will must be done. Yeah? And if that takes hold of a person, they become the image of that thought. And they become like the gods of the Bible. In my image, in my likeness. Becoming my image, in my likeness, like me. Becoming like God. So, but then, as I say, the reasoning of God then is, to the ordinary human being, not the elevated one, the plebs. You do as I tell you. And if your sins are as crimson as blood, I will make it righteous. It's okay. Just suppress your own knowing. Don't go by your own knowing as a human being. And I will give you the riches of the land. I will make you a mighty man. I will make your people a mighty people. And if you go up against me, I will destroy you. So then it might be the reasoning of a mother, that it's really in the child's best interest to become that. Yeah, to suppress its own knowing, to do as it's told, because then it will get the riches of this world and will have a good life, so to speak, materialistically good life anyway. And if I teach my child to go up against it, it will only cause suffering and it will be destroyed. But really not seeing the trauma that you are inflicting on the child by doing that. Because the child will constantly have to go up against its own knowing of good and bad. And that is where the constant trauma will come from. And if you say, it can live the life in this world fitting in, that is best for the child. I don't think so. You will have a traumatized human being that can outwardly fit in, and that is inwardly torn apart. Or, as I say, they either have come into agreement, they've reasoned and they've come into agreement, or they really are, after generations of conditioning, are deluded enough to love that God, or they fear him. They protect the child by teaching the child to jump through all of the hoops. They're protecting it, or thinking they're protecting it, because they fear God. They fear the mighty. Any which way you look at that, it is not love for the child. Not loving the child for what it is. And you're creating abominations. Here's the thing, you are creating abominations. When I was thinking about that this morning, I was thinking of bonsai trees. Believe it or not. Yeah, where somehow we've come to this idea that that is beauty. And you take a little tree and you put it into a pot that is nowhere near big enough for it, far too small, where it cannot grow into what it is. And then you start pruning it the entire time to make it into something that you want it to be. And then we saying now that plants have some sort of experience of themselves in this world, then that tree is traumatized. That little tree is traumatized. And we can look at it and call it beautiful. Then there's something terribly wrong with us. If we cannot see the suffering inside of that tree, if we cannot see the suffering inside of the people that we are creating, that mothers are creating, making their children into by traumatizing them. That bonsai tree is an abomination. The children we create are abominations to nature. They are abominations to our truth. And then they can do things in service to the mighty that are no longer human, because they are abominations. They have been raised to be that by their mothers, by their fathers, who were raised in that way beforehand. We go back to look at the trauma of humanity. You need to get back to the point where, when the gods arrived on earth and starting creating us, teaching us, making us into something that is no longer natural to this world. Pruning us, restricting our space, and creating trauma all the time. And we've passed that on from generation to generation. How does God allow evil in this world? He's created it. The gods have created it, and it serves them. That's why it's in this world. You look for evil and you're looking at humanity, and then you're pointing out to the heavens and saying, that is all sweetness and light and love. You have got it completely the wrong way around. Completely. You're calling good evil and evil good. You are looking for evil in that which was traumatized and brutalized. You're calling that evil. And you're calling the entities that are producing that love. It's so back to front. So the way out of it is for us to stand in our own truth. Not a truth that will serve something else. And then do it out of, as I said, if you twist it enough, you're doing it out of love. But you do it out of fear, or your reason that it might be best for you if you do it that way. Now, our own truth is love your neighbor as yourself. Does not mean give everything to your neighbor, because you wouldn't give everything to yourself. Yeah? Don't do unto others what you do not want to be done to yourself. That is our truth. And that is where we know good and bad from the experience of self. From self. We know it hurts us. We know it will hurt others. We know it as bad if it happens to us. So we do not do it to others. But in order to know that way of good and bad, you need to have a self. You need to have a natural self. And you must stand in that truth. Again, all religion tells you, do away with the self. Suppress the self to gain some greater awareness of, no, you don't. You're going into darkness. You're going into not knowing. You're becoming an abomination that can be used as a tool for evil. That's how evil is in this world, because we are not standing in our truth. And we are raising children to become abominations. And then the conflict, the trauma, the conflict will endlessly go on. And then we run into church begging the very ones that have introduced that to liberate us. What the hell? That is full on Stockholm Syndrome. I mean, that is Stockholm Syndrome. You're begging of your abuser to stop abusing you. And then when he stops abusing you for 5 seconds, you call that love. Yeah, no, religious mothers, they don't love their children. They love God. Or fear God. Of come into agreement with God. And they're making their children into something that will serve the mighty, the rulers. And then their children become abominations that can do things that are no longer human. That is not love. So we need to learn to love ourselves again. To see our truth and to love ourselves again. And to love our children for what they are. Human beings. And then we will work through the trauma by looking at the truth. Right. Anyway, here folks, I think I'll leave it at that for today. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.